Okay, yeah. So we're in the middle of chapter 7 here, and he's in the middle of explaining the difference between that which is permitted and that which is forbidden in Jewish law. And he dwelled on the idea that the word for forbidden in Hebrew is asur, which also means imprisoned. And that relates to the Kabbalistic aspect of everything that is forbidden. And that is that the things that are forbidden because the divine sparks in them are completely imprisoned. They can't be released. When Mashiach will come, maybe then we'll be able to release them. And therefore, even if we try to release them, we won't be able to. Now, the word for permitted in Hebrew is mutar, if you recall, which means to untie or free, untied, unbound, like he said. And the reason for that is because, again, those areas that are permitted have divine sparks that are untied and are just waiting for us to come and elevate them and release them all together. So that's the difference between asur and mutar, those two realms that really are speaking to our relationship with them. The asur, divine sparks are too imprisoned, and therefore we shouldn't touch. We'll never be able to release them until Mashiach comes. And then the mutar, the permitted, that's where we should focus all of our efforts and go to the permitted areas, like so many times we use the example of eating, sleeping, whatever it is, that whatever we are doing that is permitted, we should do it with the intent to elevate it and to bridge that part of the earth to the heavens. So that was the big idea. I want to continue here at the bottom of page 187. Of course, continue to hear also your comments and questions and disagreements and so on, because that's what learning is all about. Okay, who wants to read? Bottom of page 187. Anyone?
I'll read.
Oh, thank you, Margot. Thank you.
Okay. This explains why there are so many more halachic prohibitions nowadays than there were in earlier periods, such as the time of the Talmud. One certainly cannot say that the Talmud scholars ate forbidden food and that only we eat what is truly kosher. Permitted and forbidden, as explained, are functions of our capacity to extract the positive essence of a thing from its negative embodiment. A lesser person has a lesser capacity. So for him, there are fewer things that can be elevated and set free from the bounds of klipa. Hence, the lower the spiritual stature of a generation, the more things are forbidden to it. And the greater a person is, the greater his capacity to elevate things that lie in the twilight zone that borders on the forbidden.
Right. So I just want to focus on that just for a second. So there is this concept called, which also stems from the Talmud, called Yeridat Hadorot, which means the descent of generations. That with each generation evolving, we are becoming lower and lower than previous generations. You know, there's that famous story with, I think it was Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, who was a great halachic authority who lived in America, but of our generation. And he was once traveling with these students on a plane, and he sat down next to someone who was, I think, a professor, who also had students on a plane. But the difference between Rabbi Moshe Feinstein and the professor is that Rabbi Moshe Feinstein's students would come to him every few minutes and say to him, Rabbi, can we get you anything? Rabbi, are you comfortable? Rabbi, do you need this? Do you need that? And the professor's students left him alone altogether. And the professor at one point turned to Rabbi Moshe Feinstein and says, wow, I've never seen anything like this. The respect they have for you is unbelievable. And how come my students are not that way? Now, this professor was an atheist too. And Rabbi Moshe Feinstein turns to him and he says to him, well, I'll tell you why. Because our students view each of us in very different ways. You see, I believe that God created Adam and Eve were the most, therefore, divine creatures. And from then on, it just went down. We became less and less divine. So in their eyes, I am more divine than them because I am closer to God than them. But you believe that we came from an ape. So the further you are removed from an ape, the more you are human. And therefore, when they see you, they see that you are less than them because you're closer to the ape than they are. They are more human than you, and therefore they don't respect you. Whatever, that's the story. But that again, it ties back, whether you like it or not, it ties back to this concept of Yeridat Hadorot, the descent of generations. In the words of the Talmud, Talmud would say this: Im rishonim kamalachim, anachnu kivnei adam, ve'im rishonim kibnei adam, anachnu kachamorim, ve'lo kachamoro shel Pinchas ben Yair. That's the words verbatim from the Talmud, which means that if the first generations were like angels, we're just like human beings. But if the first generations were like human beings, we're just like donkeys. And not like the donkey of Pinchas ben Yair was a famous Mishnaic sage whose donkey spoke. So a lowly donkey. And there's this concept that with each generation, we are really losing a little bit of that divine connection and therefore are less. And now, the lower we are, therefore, the less capable we are to elevate those divine spots. And therefore, more and more things are forbidden, according to Rabbi Steinsaltz's words here. Which, by the way, again, emphasizes what we read about yesterday in the Ten Commandments. Yesterday was the portion of the Ten Commandments that part of respecting your parents is respecting the fact that they spiritually are higher than you. That generation is a higher generation. And in a way that also explains why, if you think about this, not to deviate too much, but the Ten Commandments are very well organized in the sense, as the Talmud points out, that the first 5 commandments are on one side of the tablet, the other 5 on the other side of the tablet. The first side of the tablet speaks of commandments between us and God, or as they call it, Ben Adam Lamakom, while the other side of the commandments speaks of commandments of our duties between us and human beings, right? So, for example, I am God your Lord, or you shall not worship idols, commandment number 2, or you shall not swear in God's name, commandment number 3. All these have our duties towards God. While the other side, do not steal, do not commit adultery, do not murder, and so on. Those are my responsibilities towards others. That's the way the commandments are well divided. But if you think about this, there is one commandment on the first side that seems misplaced. It should really be with the commandments that deal with others. Which commandment? The commandment of respecting your parents, which is the 5th of the 5 of the commandments on the first side. Because respecting your parents is me versus others, human beings after all. And here comes the Talmud and says, no, your parents, there's a deeper, based on this again, a deeper commentary. Your parents are divine, are more divine than you are. And Talmud also speaks of 3 partners to every human being: father and his mother and God. Without God in the picture, a human being can't be created. So by respecting your parents, you're respecting God. And therefore it belongs to side number 1. So that again comes to emphasize the idea that the further we are moving forward in the story of mankind, the further also we are removed a little bit from divinity, and therefore the previous generations are more divine, are holier. And there I state, now you may disagree, but I don't think that we live in a very orphan generation. Very orphan generation. In previous generations, there were many greats, revealed greats. I'm not talking about hidden greats. I'm sure there are many hidden greats, including many of you here on Zoom. Maybe all of you actually. But revealed greats, there aren't too many. While in previous generation, they were really great people. I mean, in all areas of life, especially in Judaism. I could name hundreds in previous generations. This generation, I don't know, help me out. I can't name too many. Maybe also it's a sign of this descent of generations, of Yeridat Hadorot. But this is what this is referring to. Or going back to the point that because we are more limited, therefore there are more forbidden things, because we don't have that same power to go ahead and release those divine sparks from a mystical standpoint. Okay, I want to open this up to any comments, questions, disagreements. Otherwise, we can continue.
Rabbi, quick question.
Yes.
Thank you. In that in the first sentence on 188, where it says truly kosher.
Yeah.
I mean, at the time of the Talmud, there was already 1,000 years approximately of Torah.
Right.
Of written law, of oral law. So what does this mean? I mean, what was kosher in the times of the Talmud? How would that be any different today than it would be then?
Right. So that's a good question. Yeah, I was also asking myself the question because so the first idea that came to mind is just maybe I'm not reading this well, but maybe it's this idea that today, right? I mean, you just have to go to Safeway, Fry's, or in Israel it's even worse. You have like 10 different types of kosher certificates for 10 different types of products, and one doesn't agree with the other, and so on. Everyone is trying to be truly kosher. Going back to those words. Well, back in the day, there was one kosher certification, and that's it. That's it. Everyone agreed with it, and that's it. No one tried to fight over the other. Maybe that's what it's referring to. I don't know. Did you read it differently?
No, I just was perplexed in reading it, because I think that what's kosher today would have been kosher 2,000 years ago, at least, according to the written and oral law.
Right. Yeah. No, absolutely. I think it's just, maybe it's referring to the again.
Yeah.
The multiplicity of the certifications, which sometimes is completely unnecessary, completely politics. But maybe that's what. I don't know how else to read this. Yeah. I'm just trying to think also of maybe things that were kosher back in the day, and now today they're not kosher. I can't think of really of anything like that. Yeah. Okay. So good point. Unless anyone can here. No? Okay. All right. I just want to add one dimension here to Rabbi Schnauz's words, and that is that there's something else that needs to be said. I know we're speaking of the descent of generations and how lowly we are, but on the other hand, also this idea that we don't have as many sparks to elevate as previous generations did, also is because, and thanks to previous generations. Previous generations did elevate many sparks. And now the work that is left is little. They did most of the work for us. So maybe that is also why there are more and more things that are forbidden, alluding to this idea that, again, there aren't too many things left. So leave most areas. Most areas are forbidden. God is just trying to focus us on that which is left, because most of the work was done by previous generations. By the way, that mystically, I know we can't see it visibly, but mystically, this is how Mashiach can come, even today, and hopefully today. Why? Because one may wake up this morning, open his eyes and say, whoa, it's still the same terrible world that I live in today as I lived in yesterday, a month ago, a year ago, 10 years ago. So how is Mashiach going to come? But mystically, what is happening is that more and more generations are elevating those sparks. Now, all we have left to do is just a few sparks left and elevate them. So even though we can't see it, still the work of the generations is behind us. So as like the Talmud says, we are like dwarves on giants' shoulders. The giants wanted to get to a certain height, and they tried, and they grew and grew and grew and became more and more giants. But we recognize that there's this descent of generations, so we're like dwarves. But still, these dwarfs, if they can put themselves on the giant shoulders, they'll reach the heights that were envisioned once upon a time. So with us doing that little work that is left, then we can reach finally those heights, because we'll be standing on the shoulders of the giants who did do most of the work. That's just another Kabbalistic idea here that is connected, of course, to this idea that we have less work today than in previous generations.
I have a comment.
Yes.
I think our job is not only to stand on the shoulders of the giants, but to become bigger and become giants ourselves. There's something that I'm having a challenge with here, because I really believe it is our role to elevate ourselves. And when perhaps we have become elevated enough, Mashiach will come. I don't think that we need to be waiting for Mashiach to be elevating us. I think that it is our job to stand on those who have gone before us and become as great and amazing as we can be. And that will draw in Mashiach. I don't think that we need to be waiting
Right.
to aspire to that.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Right. We have to be as, so there's two things to what you just said. Number one, what makes us great? And usually the answer is action makes us great.
Action, mitzvahs,
Right.
the way we live our
That's right.
life.
Exactly. So we have to do what we have to do. Now, what we have to do is limited compared to what previous generations had to do. So
But we
from,
can make it more. It's like, yes, it is limited, but we can expand it greater. I mean, I think it's up to us to expand it as much as previous generations did. I mean,
Right.
I think that that's our role here, is that we need to grow more than we think we can, which we can do.
right. No, absolutely. So that if the actions make us great, so then the more actions, the greater we can become. But still, there is this idea that we are somehow, even with the many actions that we can do, compared to previous generations, we don't have that ability to be as great. Maybe it's beyond us. As mentioned, maybe it's just because previous generations were closer to the divine than we are.
But why?
But we
is
have to
that,
try,
Stephanie?
we certainly have to try to be as great as we could.
Yes, but why do we not have the potential to be as great as previous generations? I think that's what we need to aspire to
Right.
aspire with. I mean, because I find your words, your explanation a tad limiting to the greatness that we can all become.
Right. And it's not like I'm not saying, I'm just saying this from a factual standpoint. Look,
Okay.
but it's not like we can't aspire to. We must aspire to. We must aspire to be as great as possible, and maybe even greater than previous generations. The big question though is, without that closer connection to the divine, maybe also, by the way, there's a lot of factors, right? This is a big intricate picture, but maybe also with the generation that we live in and the distractions that there are. I mean, back then maybe they were greater because they don't have as many distractions.
But
Today, everyone's
different distractions, because it was a different world.
it was a different world. That's what I'm saying. It was
So they
easier.
had different things to be distracted about. But I'm really trying to have a conversation about aspirations and
Right.
why ours cannot be as great. They're different. They're
Right.
very different. But it's like, why are we not as close to
Right.
God? I mean, why is there a generational difference if God is great in covering us all? Why is there a generational difference?
So,
By standing on the shoulders of those who came before us, we can see further.
yeah, very well said. Yeah.
Differently. We see differently. I mean, I think there's times you
I
need.
also, I think the idea is not to put us down. When the Talmud says that if the previous generations were like angels, we're just like human beings, or if they were like human beings, we're just like donkeys. The idea is not just to put us down. The idea is to, in a way, frame the work that we have, so that it's almost like we've mentioned the story of Reb Zusha, the Hasidic Jew, who was once found crying, and they asked him, "Why are you crying?" And he said, "That's because when I die and go up to the heavens, God is not going to ask me, why wasn't I like Moses? Why wasn't I like Abraham? God is going to ask me, why wasn't Zusha like Zusha?" So in a way, this Talmudic statement, again, is not here to put us down, but it's to frame the work so that we don't try to become like Moses, so that we don't try to become like Abraham, so that we know that our work now is a work of in this sphere. All the rest is forbidden, like Rabbi Stein is saying. This is the sphere. Don't try to be like Moses. Be you. Be your generation. Every generation is its calling. Every human being has its calling, and every generation that has its own general calling. And we have to be in tune with that instead of trying to be like the other people, whether in this generation or in previous generations, but particularly in previous generations. So I think that's the idea, right? Every generation has its own calling. And by the way, I really believe that our generation's calling is to bring Mashiach. There's nothing, we're the closest to Mashiach that the world has ever been. And many greats, from the Baba Sali to the Lubavitcher Rebbe of blessed memory, to the, Rabbi Mordechai Eliyahu, I was close to the chief rabbi of Israel of 25 years ago, truly a holy man. Everyone said, or all those greats said, that this is it. Our generation is bringing the Mashiach. We're very close to the finish line. And in a way, even though our work is more limited, and even though we aren't maybe as great as previous generations, but still, we will have the merit to bring the Mashiach with that work that is left. So the idea again is focus on you. Focus on what you can do. Don't try to be like Moses. Be you. Be the best you there is out there.
Were previous generations seen as great during their generations, or are we just seeing them as being great now because they're past?
Oh, that's a great question.
You know what I mean?
Right. There's a play on the words. So the order of the portions of the week lead us to the portions in the book of Leviticus of Vayikra, that is Acharei Mot Kedoshim, and sometimes these two portions are combined. Acharei Mot Kedoshim, Acharei Mot, which means after the death, speaks after the death of the sons of Aaron. Kedoshim means holy. That's the next portion. And very often people would play on these words and say Acharei Mot, after someone dies, Kedoshim, say that he's holy.
Right.
After someone dies, all of a sudden he appears holy. Which points to a different idea, maybe that I'll mention, because that has a very practical side to it. So are we just seeing them as holy because they passed, or were they truly holy? And did they see those previous generations before them holy? Look, objectively speaking, I think they were truly holier than we are. Look, just if what makes a person great, as mentioned, is his actions, his mitzvot, the accomplishments, the Jewish accomplishments, I'm not talking about other spheres, the Jewish accomplishments of previous generation is massive compared to the Jewish accomplishments of our generation. Not just in literature, the bookshelf, the Jewish bookshelf is full of books from previous generations and very little from our generation. But I'm speaking about also other massive achievements. So I think so. But again, it's not there to put us down. It's just there for us to focus on the little work that we have left.
A comment about the Jewish bookshelves, and just a comment is, I 100% agree with you. But then if you kind of look at Technion, for example, the Jewish brain has been brilliant and has been creating and has been changing the world, perhaps not by writing about God and Torah and Talmud, but I think that the brain itself has revolutionized the world, and we should be so proud of that fact.
No, absolutely. But that also is, thank God, due to the advancement in the world of technology, right? So they could combine the wisdom with the intelligence that it provides and then create wonders, which they do so brilliantly at Technion and other places too. And that's the Jewish mind, the Yiddish kop, as they call it. Yeah. But you're right. So we've had that advantage, no doubt. And in the technological world, we see greater advancements than in previous generations. But again, forget the previous generations. The focus is on our generation, and we have to try to be as great as we only can be, not as Moses was, or as Abraham was, or as Queen Esther was, but as we only can be. We have to learn from them, and maybe they teach us on how to become great. But then focus on that. And if we don't become like Moses, it doesn't matter. That wasn't the goal. The goal was to be the best us we can be. I just want to. Maybe I'm a little bit deviating, but I think it's very, very important. What Margot brought up is that, very often when people die, we see them, then we say, oh, they were holy. And I bemoan the fact, and I've written about this, I bemoan the fact that we have to wait for a person to die to be able to fully appreciate them. Why can't we appreciate them during their lifetime? Why is beloved husband, beloved father, beloved friend, very often an adjective that we give on a tombstone,
Right.
not directly to a human being while he or she is alive? And I think the answer is because when a person passes on, it's not that they change, they become all of a sudden saints. We change. We start to see the full picture of the person. You see, when a person is alive, we're so focused on on one side of them, and usually it's that negative side of them, that we get irked and aggravated and frustrated, and we dismiss the person because we're only seeing a very limited side of them. When a person dies, then we start seeing the big picture of the person, and we say, oh, wow, he had that positive side and this positive side. Oh, they were holy. Acharei mot kedoshim. They were holy. But why can't we see the positive sides of the person while that person is alive? Isn't it such a shame that sometimes years and years go by until we can see the positive side of that person? Do we have to wait for death for us to appreciate that person? I've never understood that. And I see that in funerals all the time. You have eulogies that are as praiseworthy as they get, but you say to yourself, 1 second, you didn't speak about this person during his lifetime. But what this teaches us, it should propel us to say, I love you more, to say, I appreciate you more, to say, oh, wow, I see your positive side, and I'm not going to judge you on your negative side more. That's really another lesson from this little paragraph here, that let's not wait for the generations to become previous generations for us to appreciate them. The present generation should be appreciated just as much, if not more. And we have to expand sometimes our view on the other. And if it's an individual that we're speaking of, on the entire generation, if it's the generation that we're speaking of, in order to truly appreciate them while they are alive before it is too late. So that's yet another realm to this discussion.